Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. Okay, so welcome to the second half of this Employer Advisory Committee. I'm Christine Briseno, and I'm the director of the Member and Employer Account Services for CalSTRS. And joining me here, I have Diane Stanton, who's the director of our External Affairs Committee. We have a pretty full agenda for you this afternoon. So we're going to get started. And first up is our legislative and regulatory update with Joycelyn Martinez-Wade.
Good afternoon. It's good to see everyone. So to start, I'm going to talk about last year's bills. So that's the goldenrod matrix. Mine is one white paper, but you have the goldenrods of the 2018 legislation that we were tracking. So I'll run through those pretty quickly and then stop for questions. So I'll start with AB 2052 on the first page. You're familiar with that one as one of our sponsored bills we've discussed throughout last year. This is effective upon our board's authorization, requiring employers to submit contributions using electronic funds transfer. Now, using EFT is something you all can do right now, and I know a lot of employers do that. So we encourage you to start doing that now, but we are working internally on how this is going to be implemented. As you notice, it doesn't become effective until our board authorizes it. And right now, tentatively, the group that's working on this is looking at maybe July 2019 for going to the board, and perhaps an effective date of July 2020. So to give time for everybody to get ready for this, although again, it is something you can currently do. And also, as you know, part of this will be a waiver process in case there's some reason that you're not able to use electronic funds transfers to get the contributions in the door to CalSTRS. Going on to page 2, just to let you know, a couple bills on this page. AJR 41 was a joint resolution requesting that the federal government repeal the government pension offset and windfall elimination provision. And those are pieces of the Social Security Act that affect if we have a CalSTRS member who also is receiving Social Security, those are offsets to their Social Security benefit. They don't affect their CalSTRS benefit, but they do affect their Social Security benefit. And usually for every session, there is one of these resolutions. So this one was passed both houses, so it was adopted. And lower down on the page, SB 964, this is more of an investment bill, but just to let you know that that was chaptered. And so our staff will be working on reporting every 3 years on climate-related financial risk that affects our fund. And going to page 3, SB 1165 was chaptered, and that's our housekeeping bill. And again, you're familiar with that. We discussed it throughout last year, but I just want to remind you of a couple different provisions dealing with membership, and we will obviously, that's a hot topic today, we have the membership directive, but two of the pieces that were in that bill were clarifying that for each position that a CalSTRS member takes on that is not CalSTRS covered, if they want to elect CalSTRS coverage, they have to do it individually for each of those positions. And then this one, I think you're even more familiar with, is the submission deadline for retirement system elections and permissive membership elections. They moved from 30 days to 60 days as the submission deadline, so extended that time, after we heard from you the difficulties with the 30 days. And also, you can establish membership as early as the first day of the pay period of the employee's signature date, as opposed to the following pay period. So again, that's SB 1165. Those are signed into law effective January 1st. So I believe those are reflected in the directive that will be gone over later in the program today. Any questions on 2018 legislation? And I want to hit on something from 2017 that we didn't talk about at all in EAC as far as I know, but it was SB 179. So it went through the legislature in 2017, and it's effective in 2019. And it's not on any of your materials, so again, sorry about that, but it's SB 179, and I just want to give you a heads up to expect a directive. And what the bill did was it essentially allowed for a non-binary gender choice. So in addition to male and female, that you could choose a non-binary gender. So what the directive will do when it does come out is tell you how to go ahead and apply that in the system when the time comes. So be on the lookout for that. Okay. So now we've covered 2017, 2018, and going into 2019. There are 3 draft analyses in your packet that you'll see. I'm going to start with, and they're not totally clearly labeled, apologies, because obviously they're not in bills yet, but I'm going to start with a housekeeping proposal. And on page 1 of that one, under Program Background and Analysis, the first title you'll see is Clarification of Retired Member Activity Limitations. So looking at the first page of you have 3 documents that kind of look like this, that say draft across and say bill analysis at the top. It's the one that says AB XXXX. Thank you. That's an easier way to identify it. And this has a summary of all of the different provisions we're looking at going forward with next year in a housekeeping bill. And I just want to point out the ones that I think have the most impact to employers. So actually the one I just read the title for on page 1 under Program Background and Analysis, where it says Clarification of Retired Member Activity Limitations. So retired member activities, familiar with that, and the limitations. One of the requirements in the law is that if you do hire a retired member, they must be paid no less than the minimum and no more than the maximum that position would receive if there are other employees being paid for that. So one of the things that has come up is sometimes there are not other people performing that work at the same time. So we've recognized that, and the intent of the law is basically to reflect what active members are earning in those positions. So we're going to clarify the law to say that it's no less than the minimum or no more than the maximum of what an active member would be paid to perform those duties. So if an active member was hired instead of that retired member, what would they be paid? And then the annual earnings limit is applied to that. And that's looking beyond the separation from service period, the $0 limit for the first 180 days. So that's not looking at that parameter right now. Any questions around that one? Okay, then I'm going to draw your attention on page 2. In the center of the page where it says removal of obsolete sections. These are obsolete, so they don't affect you, but I wanted to draw your attention to them because they are in the membership section of the law. You can see the section numbers, 22.510, 22.511, 22.512, et cetera, under sections affected. And so those are in that chapter of the law. We are looking at removing them from the law, and we just wanted to assure you that these are dating back to 1974. They're obsolete. There are no members affected by them now. So if you do see them getting repealed, don't be alarmed. But let us know if you have questions. Okay, and then moving to page 3, at the top of the page, and this, I don't know how much of your workload revolves around when our members are looking for refunds, but if they're looking for refund applications and they haven't been separated for more than 12 months, we do ask you to certify that they've terminated employment. Right now it's 12 months before the signature date. Sometimes we get those forms well after the signature date, and so we want to only come to you for certification if it's 12 months after the date we receive it, because we'll be able to tell in our system if we haven't gotten any lines in between that time. So we don't want to go bother you about something maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if they happen to have signed it way back then but gotten it to us later. So hopefully this reduces a little bit of that workload, however much of it you do see each year. So I want to bring that one to your attention. And then the next one below on page 3 is one you saw last year. We talked about it early on. And so we're hoping that we can pursue it this year. We did more work over the last year, talking to folks, getting feedback. So this has to do with remuneration in addition to salary and compensation earnable. And I think the best place to look is actually on page 4, where it says what the proposal will do. Everything before that kind of describes how we work now. So please review that. But one of the things we have is that our definition of compensation earnable actually contains like 3 kind of fundamental concepts for our law. And one of them is the annualized pay rate, which I think you're familiar with that term that we use more casually, but it's not in our law. And that's the salary or wages a person can earn during a school term for service performed on a full-time basis. So that's what you report to us, is that pay rate. So we actually want to put that in its own definition section and use the term that we're more familiar with, annualized pay rate. And again, that's what you report to us. And then compensation earnable for us is that the salary and wages that are, then the compensation earnable is what we use for final compensation. So then we would have that as a separate definition. The other fundamental concept that's right now in that definition has to do with a comparison calculation for certain part-time community college faculty. So we also want to pull that out with the directions on how to calculate their benefits and put that in a separate section. So we're not having three things in one definition. So then you would see annualized pay rate, again, the full-time pay rate that you would report to us. We'd see comp earnable, compensation earnable, which is what we use for final compensation. And then this is the comparison calculation for community college faculty would go in its own section. Some of the other things that this proposal would do is to make sure, and this is how we do things already, but we want to be very clear in the law that only salary and wages are used to determine service credit, and then compensation earnable used to determine final compensation. We want to be clear about the formula that's used for that. And so that's what we'll be doing in this measure. And then also making sure to be clear, especially for 2 at 62 members, the members subject to PEPRA, that they're paid either salary or remuneration in addition to salary. It's not totally clear in the law right now, so we want to try to do that. That one's a complex one, but it is all basically housekeeping, cleanup, getting things in line. So any questions? Okay. So, and just to let you know, on all of these, we're working on language now so that obviously we can get it into council and get the bills introduced. So you'll be able to see that before too long. And then that's also a nice concrete thing to look at to use as a basis for any questions you might have. Okay, next, I'm going to go over the one that says bill number and doesn't have anything after it. And this one is a membership cleanup proposal. We're actually hoping that these provisions can go into the housekeeping bill as well, but we're working with our stakeholders to make sure that's okay. If not, we'll probably have 2 housekeeping bills. And I will go over some of this pretty quickly because a lot of this is cleanup and clarification that you'll see in the membership directive presentation a little bit later. And so this is just some of it's current law, but we want clarification in the law. But the first one on the membership dates for mandated membership, I'm going to go to the proposed on page 2, at the top of page 2, so what the measure does. And we're changing the effective date for members who are hired on a part-time basis for 50% or more of full-time, and those hired on a permanent basis to being the first day of employment, so that they would be a member as of the first day of employment as opposed to the first day of the next pay period. So I think many employers do that already. I think it depends on, and I know it depends on when they consider the person being employed. So if they're employed before they show up at the school for the first day of service, then I think they get entered into the system for that first month of the school year. But I think some districts may look at it and say, okay, they're here September 1st. This is their first day of employment, so we're going to enter them into the system in October. And so this would say the first day of employment, so everybody would be entered in September. And that way you don't have to put them in Social Security first and then flip them over to CalSTRS. And so that will just be a consistency measure there. The one reason we think this might be in a separate bill is there could be a little cost associated with that if you're not doing that already because of the contributions you would be submitting to CalSTRS, the employer contributions. And so right now, the Social Security contributions are less, and you would submit those, so there would be the additional amount to make up to the amount of the employer contributions. But that's something that we're talking with the Appropriations Committee in the legislature about, and we'll see where it ends up in the bill. Questions about that one? Okay. These next few, again, are really highlighted in the directive, so I'll go pretty quickly. The next one about aggregating service. We don't aggregate service in separate part-time positions to total full-time. So they're all looked at separately. The next one has to do with making sure we're clear about community college membership. It's on a temporary or permanent basis is what we look at. You tell us whether they're if you're a community college employer, you tell us whether they're temporary or whether they're permanent, and that affects whether they become members or not. And so there's cleanup around that. The next one, talking about DB membership for persons employed by a cash balance employer. At the top of page 3, it summarizes the changes. They are all really cleanup changes and clarifications. The law is really wordy right now and a little bit confusing, so we want to clarify that. The next one is a bit of a change it's not really from current practice, but we have a couple different types of employees who would be eligible to elect to participate in the cash balance benefit program. And right now, there's no clear way that they would do that, like the process, if there's a form, whatever it is. And it's people who are trustees. And so if trustees want to elect to be in cash balance if the employer's offering it, or people who elected Social Security or an alternative retirement program, and then later want to elect into cash balance. So we want to clarify that there is a process to do that and what it is. So that's another change. And then the last one there on page 3 has to do with when a current member of the defined benefit program goes to work part-time for another employer and is able to elect cash balance, what the process is for electing defined benefit coverage for that service later. So this is a lot of interaction between defined benefit program, the cash balance benefit program, and how you elect membership and what those requirements are. And that's that proposal. Questions there? And like I said, probably a lot of those details will be covered in just a little bit. Okay. And the last one I want to bring up for 2019 says proposal annual billing of excess sick leave. So we talked about this last year and appreciated your feedback. And so we took the year to talk to more employers and find out how they tracked sick leave, how they reported sick leave, how sick leave was handled in their districts, at community college, at the K-12 level. So we definitely learned a lot. And we think that we have enough knowledge now that we can put together some language that shouldn't have any unintended consequences, that will allow us to get the data in, if you're offering excess sick leave, for us to calculate what we would need to charge to cover that amount for the employer that's offering it, and then to bill that to you annually instead of at the end of a member's career when you may or may not have been the employer that offered it. So we are definitely looking forward to getting that fleshed out and sharing that with you so you can see how that would operate. Questions there? Okay. And that's all I have for you today. So I will be around if you think of something in the meantime. So thank you very much.
Okay, so moving on in the agenda. So I'm not sure I'm ready for this. How do I put it on my presentation? Do I just click once? Maybe not. I'm sorry, Dina. Our unsung hero, Dina. Oh, okay, wrong clicker. It's okay. That's an easy problem to fix. Okay, so next on our agenda, we're going to be talking to you about our pension solution project. So we have spent the last 2 years talking with you about our efforts to go from our current database system onto a more web-based programming system to help you report. So we have had employer forums. We spoke to you here. We've talked about some of our thoughts and ideas and got all of your feedback. And I can't believe that we're actually in November of 2018. We're actually ready to start finalizing this and starting moving on to the effort to supporting all of you as we move forward into our new system. So just as a refresher, we're replacing our current CalSTRS pension administration system. Our system, that's the system that all of you use to report to track our members' service credit and compensation throughout their entire career. And this aligns with the CalSTRS strategic direction to ensure that we deliver on our services and our ultimate promise to California educators. So this effort has been collaborative and is going to take a lot. But the reason why, am I picking up the right one? Oh. But the reason why, and these are 4 of the primary benefits that we're getting out of this system, and the first is to increase our ability to respond to our customers. So as many of you know, a lot of our engagement with each other, with member account services and all of you, is to respond to issues related to benefit payments or issues or errors on member accounts. And so all of that does impact with that member experience. So the first and foremost goal of our new system is to improve our services to our mutual members. The second is to enhance our experience with all of you so that it makes it easier for us to resolve those issues, hopefully mitigate them in the first place, and make sure that ultimately your experience and our customer experience is positive. And then, of course, to gain efficiencies, so maybe we don't have to have all that back and forth, and we're really only dealing with those main core issues, and then improve the internal controls over the data in the first place. So bring us that accuracy, that completeness, and ultimately timeliness to reduce the penalties and interest to all of you as well. So how we're conducting this rollout. As we've spoken many, many times before, our very first rollout is the employer functionality within that new system. You can see that that will result in what we're calling the soft launch environment, our employer readiness environment, so that we can work with all of you beginning October of 2019, which I can't believe is less than a year away already. We will open up that environment and be working with all of you along the way to get your systems ready to report in what is the new file formats, so that when we get there in 2021, we're hopefully all reporting in that new file format, and we're all successful at the live go live of rollout 2, which is our member, which is your full employer functionality and our benefit payment systems. And then the third rollout very shortly thereafter will be to our new member self-service portal. And then we'll go into our M&O period to make sure we're working out all the bugs and anything that's happening to that point. Questions at this point? Okay, because what that means next is that at our last EAC meeting, we handed all of you our new file layouts. It was all the new fields and values. And it showed you that we're going from our normal file layouts to a very different and robust file layout, which includes our contribution file, our normal contribution file, but also introduces a new concept of an employment file, which goes to transaction-based reporting. So in one of the examples, it just kind of caught my attention that Joycelyn was talking about this morning around terminations, where we have to work with you to validate a termination, because in today's environment, you don't have to tell us that someone actually terminated with you. We just see missing reporting for a period of time. And if the member wants to refund and it's been less than 12 months, now we have to engage with one another. And so what we're hoping, just an example, is that when we're all on the system and we work the bugs out, that you would automatically submit a termination transaction on that employment file, and we wouldn't even have to talk to you if the member then submitted a refund application and it was less than 12 months from when they separated from you. We would know already that that member was terminated, and we could process that refund. So it took effort away from our exchange, and the members served seamlessly. So that's just sort of one example. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bill, who is our technical expert for employer reporting. And he is going to talk with you about the next phase of this effort to roll out these new file formats. And that includes what we're calling the new file format plus, which means we'll start to share with you the business rules behind those layouts we have already shared, and sort of the next steps in our partnership as we move forward towards go live. Okay, with that, here's Bill.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, so we are excited to deliver the File Layout Plus to you. We've talked a lot about the new file formats, how you're going to report using the new file formats, and you've clamored for more detail, more detail, more detail. Well, this document is going to provide, we hope, the detail that you need to begin those changes on your end and to start using start reporting using the new requirements. So we don't have a lot of information on the slide here, unfortunately, but I can tell you. We have the name, right. So this document will be posted to the Secure Employer website either today or at the latest close of business tomorrow. And what it contains is it has the file layouts for the contribution file and the employment file. And remember, that's the replacement of the F496, the VDF, the MRD7 file, the address file, all the files you use today. This is essentially replacing those. And so what it's going to have is it's going to have the detailed layouts for the contribution side and the employment side. And it will have the exact order of fields we expect on the file. It will have the code values that we're expecting on the file. It has definitions of what those code values mean. It has lots of detail. It's very similar to the layouts that you see in the F196 file specification today and the cash balance specification. Very similar to that. In addition, we also put in crosswalks that kind of show how you would take existing reporting from an F196 or a cash balance file and how it translates or what it looks like on the contribution file. So there's a crosswalk for the fields and for the actual values. And in some cases, there isn't really a crosswalk, but that information is in there so you can see kind of how these things translate to the new file types. We also included a matching criteria guide for adjustments and retros. There's new matching logic for special pay that's in there. And again, this section is very similar to the adjustment guide that's in the current file specifications for F196. It's very similar look and feel, but it has that detailed information on how that matching is going to work. We also included the valid value or structural type business rules that will be applied to the contribution file and the employment file, so you can see sort of, when you're giving us a salary line, what are the service types we expect, or what are the service types that are valid. It has those types of rules in there so you can see the type of reporting that's valid with other fields and values on both files. There's also a section on conversion information, and we touched on this, I believe, the last set of webinars we held. We are doing some data conversion on our end that will have an impact on the way you report, specifically with pay rates. It has all the information on how that conversion is happening and how it affects you. And then lastly, we have reporting examples or samples, so you can see how reporting looks today and how it would look using the new file formats. And we took about a dozen or so real-world examples and sort of translated them to how they would look using the contribution file. So there's a lot of information in the File Layout Plus. We encourage you to go look at it. We have some scheduled activities to talk more in depth and go over that in more detail with each and every one of you. And I'm going to invite Christine up to talk about that effort right now. But is there any questions about this information? That's going to be, there will be an announcement on the Secure Employer website homepage with a link to the document. And we're also emailing it out to all the software vendors. If you have a software vendor, we're emailing it out to them because we know they don't have access to the Secure Employer website. Any questions?
So actually, we're going to bring up Sal next.
That's right. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Because in order to make these changes permanent, and as you know, our current file layouts and specifications are included in the penalties and interest statutory regulations. So we do have to go through the rulemaking process in order to make these final. What you have is a final draft. And so Sal's going to talk about that rulemaking process.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Christine mentioned, my name is Sal Sanchez. I'm in governmental relations at CalSTRS. So part of the process involves reaching out to various stakeholders, and we're kind of in the middle of doing that, and we've been doing that for a while. The next part will be going to the board next week and presenting an information item. So just some background on the regulations for these file layouts. Currently, the legacy file formats are in regulation. They were placed in there as part of the penalties and interest regulations that went into effect about 6 years ago. So these new file formats will replace those. So in order to do that, we have to replace them in the regulations. So as I mentioned, we're going to be presenting the draft regulations to the board next week. And then the plan would be to take those same regulations and the file layouts to the board again in January and February. That's the end of January and the beginning of February is the next scheduled meeting for the board. And so at that point is when we would ask the board for authorization to actually begin the rulemaking process. That's a formal process. There are steps outlined in law and regulation as to what we need to do. So kind of a quick walkthrough of that process is, like I said, we take it to the board first to get that authorization from the board. Once we get that authorization, one of the first things that our board is going to direct us to do or not do is whether they want to hold a hearing themselves or whether they'll delegate it. And so if they choose to hold a hearing, that would most likely be at the following board meeting. So that would be probably in May, or just kind of with the timing. So the next board meeting that we'd be able to do that would be in May. In the middle of that, there's a 45-day comment period. And during that period, we could receive comments in writing from anybody who's interested in commenting on the regulatory package. So that package will be made available. There'll be a formal notice, and we'll be able to hear from anybody, whether it's employers, members, or anybody in the general public. And we take those comments and we'll be able to adjust our regulations accordingly if those comments are substantive, that we need to go back and make changes to the proposed regulations. Kind of barring any significant change, we'll kind of be able to, as I said, go back to the board for a hearing if they've elected to hold a hearing themselves. And at that time also, we can receive comments, not only written comments, but verbal comments. So you can attend the hearing and provide your comments either in writing or directly to the board. Following that, we would expect that we could go back to the board in July of 2019, and kind of at that point, the regulations would essentially be in their final form, and the board would be able to adopt those regulations. And at that point, we would then take that regulatory package to the Office of Administrative Law, and they would review it. There's a process. The California Department of Finance is involved in that process along the way as well. But we'd be looking at having the regulations go into the California Code of Regulations. So it would be on the books most likely by January 1st of 2020. So at that point, the regulations would be on the books. And just as a note, the draft regulations should be in your packet. So if you want to take a look at that. But just kind of one thing to highlight, even though they'll be on the books at the beginning of 2020, they would not go into effect until about October 2021, at the time that the rollout number 2 would also take place. So are there any questions on the process? If you do have any questions, you can direct them to our email address, regulations@calstrs.com, and we'd be able to provide any information you might have on the process, or on if you have any input. Again, this address will also be the same address that you can use during the 45-day comment period that would be coming after the rulemaking process begins. So if there are no questions, I'll turn it back to Christine. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So all of that to say, you do have the board item in your packet, and you do have the draft language of the regulation package. We did not include the file layout plus in your folders because it is more than 80 pages, and we didn't want to do that to the environment. And we want you to go back and hunt it down. We want you to be using the tools that we've given you on SO. So in your package, you also also have a one-page sheet to tell you how to, thank you, to tell you how to go find it. I'm sure most of you already read the directives and know how to get there, though, right? So you do have instructions on how to go find the directives and announcements and open up that document. And the ask is that you do go and read it, but you also bring together your technical folks and talk about the system changes that this will require for you, what the level of effort is, and start the conversation. Because as and some of you have already scheduled time with us, the next step in this process is for us to do a full employer assessment with you. So as we talk about partnering, we want to sit down with each individual employer and understand what your challenges are, what your thoughts are on your own system changes as required and laid out in the File Plus document, and to start understanding what your training needs might be, what we can do to support you through this effort. Because although the regulations are not, they won't be enforced until 2021 at go live of FR2, we're well aware that this will have a different level of effort for each of you, and we want to work with you and help you make sure that you're ready come go live of 2021. And that means that testing a file, processing manual transactions, being able to clear all of your edits and under the new rules in the system, and being able to day one process your payroll without delay. So when we do these assessment calls with you, our ask is that you have your technical teams available with you in the room, and that you've already done some analysis on the document. We will be pre-sending you a list of questions that we're hoping to speak with you about. Some of them are pretty easy, like who's going to be your main point of contact. So some of them you can already sort of gather the information. And then hopefully the question will clue you in about who else you need to have in the room. And then as Bill mentioned, we will be having similar deep dive conversations with your vendor payroll systems if that's who you use, to understand that level of effort and sort of how that might be coordinated with your solutions that are vendor supported. Questions? Okay, so.
Did you have a question?
Oh, yes, of course, Vina.
Hold on, let's wait for the microphone.
Veena from Orange County. I just want to clarify, I mean, I haven't looked at that file format lately, but I did a while ago, and there were like lots of leaves and all that. To my understanding, everything is not mandatory, right? Because sometimes there are certain items that could be HIPAA or whatever, you know. So I just wanted to know, we can select whatever we think out of those. It's not mandatory. That's what it. Like there are maybe 7-8 types of leaves that you're asking us to report.
There shouldn't be anything on that and the values listing that would have a HIPAA issue. So I would have to look at it again.
Yeah, I don't also remember,
right.
but some of
No.
it.
It would be leave. I think maternity is on the
Yes,
list.
yes.
Leave. So if that's feedback, we could talk about it.
Okay.
But as far as mandatory, going back to transaction-based reporting, if you have someone that goes out on leave, we would expect a transaction for leave.
Okay, but do we have to define what kind of leave? Let's say there were 7-8 types of leaves.
Right. We would want it to be identified, because depending on what type of leave it is determines how it is purchasable by the member. So military leave has a different purchase rules than medical leave. Whether that medical leave is maternity leave, that might be a discernment we can make. So we can talk about that, and that is good feedback for the process.
Yeah, and like some of it could be not like that county has to provide, districts can go on their own, like they do for military. Mm-hmm. So they can go on their own.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be through the file. know?
No, it does not. And as a matter
Okay.
of fact, I know
Thank
that I'm a little hesitant to open up this conversation, but as a matter of fact, I do know that because today you don't do transaction-based reporting, you can go in and do an enrollment. We all do that when someone comes in the system, right? But we don't today often have to do a leave transaction or a termination transaction. The only time we have to really do that is because the member has initiated something at the end of their career, right? Well, and in this new style of reporting, we'd want it in real time along the member's employment record, right? So we would want those to be processed, and you can do that in an employment file approach. But I know that the majority of you will probably be doing that manually. And so we're going to need to talk in our assessment conversations about what the magnitude of that manual entry workload might be for you, and how we can build an employment file together so that you don't have to do all of that manual entry. You're welcome. Other questions? Okay, so what is our ask? We want you to talk to everyone that you need to talk to in your world about how we can make this happen together. In some cases, you'll need access to resources and your technical folks. So we'll want you to send the flag up when you start to look at that file format layouts and look at the questions that we're asking and make sure you have the right folks in the room. We want to have that access to those technical teams in these conversations, and we want full participation. These conversations will be a 2-hour conference call webinar approach, and it will be specifically for you and your group. So this will not be like our employer forums where we have a lot of different employers on the call. It's just you and your teams and us and our technical folks so that we can determine your readiness and create a plan for you going forward through the soft launch window period. Okay. So thank you to those who have already scheduled that. If you haven't yet, you will be contacted very shortly to get on the calendar. We have a really tight time frame. We're trying to get these done by the end of December so that we can have a full plan for you by February on how we're going to work together and sort of where to put you within that soft launch window to start testing in the employer readiness environment. And then, of course, parallel to that effort will be the regulatory process so that you can provide feedback, whether it's to us during the assessment calls or through the regulation comment period. This is the next big wave of effort that we'll be asking from you. Did you have a question? No? Okay. So, as promised, the next thing up on our agenda is... we wanted to make sure that we brought you some actual training to this session. So we have Gabriel Gondarek. Can you see that? It's okay. He's going to be talking to you about our membership directive and taking some feedback about the format. So we know that it was a lot of pages in our new style of to provide information for you in a directive. So again, that's another reason why you have that one-page cheat sheet of how to go find those directives, because in the future we don't want to have to mail those out to you. We want you to be aware that they're out there and then go get them to save the environment and a lot of postage. So come on up, Gabe, and we're going to talk about membership.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabe Gondara, and I am part of the Employer Services unit within Member Account Services. And as part of the training team, I work closely with many of your contacts back at CalSTRS, and I'm also out on the road training at various county offices of education and at the member service centers. And I'm happy to see a few faces that I recognize from being out on the road. Hello, everybody. But before we get started, I would like to take a couple of minutes to thank you, our employers, for being so receptive when we contact you in regards to training, those verification of edits on your files, and various reporting issues. I know my colleagues definitely appreciate the collaborative approach. That being said, please know that we're always working with the goal and aim to make your jobs just a little bit easier. And That's what this directive is all about. So today, I'll be presenting on the new membership directive that just came out in September. There is a lot, so I won't be able to cover everything, but I'll hit on some of the major highlights, and then we'll see where the discussion goes from there. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the directive already. You've probably already read it. So just know that this is an open presentation. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. I much prefer it that way. Grab the mic runner, and we'll just talk about it. We'll talk it out, and it'll be fun. Heads up, my colleagues over here to the left, they may be jumping in at some point. If that's okay with you, colleagues? Is that okay with everybody here? Okay, cool. Well, let's get going then. The first thing I want to say about the directive is that our wonderful legislative unit that writes the directives is making a push to have it be a bit more comprehensive of the subject area that it addresses, like Christine was telling us. So this particular directive speaks to pretty much all things membership with CalSTRS. So it's definitely a handy tool to keep around. It's well written, easy to digest, probably makes a little more sense than the law, probably easier to read than the law, but please know it won't take the precedence over the law, okay? The law always takes precedence. So keep this tool around, but you may have to refer to that teacher retirement law at the end of the day. So for the next 30, 40 minutes, we're going to talk about the permissive election of membership, due dates and effective dates for when an employee decides to elect. We'll talk about the cash balance program and the good things that are happening there. I know we may not have a large population of cash balance employers here, but can I get a show of hands real quick? Okay, awesome, perfect. We're also live streaming folks in here as well. So we will touch on some of the highlights and then just see where the conversation goes from there. We're going to talk about timeframes for submitting the retirement system election form. And finally, we'll talk about sustainability and what that means to CalSTRS and how that relates to this most recent directive. So as a trainer of the teacher retirement law, I've had the privilege of interacting with all of you and gaining some insight into how the law affects you on a day-to-day basis. And an unfortunate result of a legislative change a couple years back was that some members were losing out on time and contributions waiting to become a member the first day of the following pay period. And then you as an employer, you're having a tough time having to enroll them as non-members just to then re-enroll them as a member, right? So our wonderful legislative team got busy working on how they can make this better for you. So effective January 1st, 2019, the membership date for those that permissively elect can be as early as of the first day of the pay period in which they are electing. Now, the actual form won't be available until the end of the year, but we'll definitely send out a message via the Secure Employer website, your reporting contact back at CalSTRS. We'll send you an email letting you know, hey, that new form is available. CalSTRS does still require that you notify the employee of their ability to elect within 30 days of the date of hire, and that we get that form to us back here at CalSTRS within 60 days. So this is the new thing. This is the new change. You have an extra 30 days to get that form back to us at CalSTRS. And we hope that makes it a little bit easier on your end, right? That 30 days was almost close to impossible, huh? So as a general reminder, please note that when a member permissively elects membership, CalSTRS sees this as a conscious decision that they want DB, not just for that particular employer, but for all employers and all future work being performed. And this is an important concept to keep in mind when we begin talking about cash balance. What questions do you have at this point about the permissive membership form? Yes, Vina, can I get a mic over here, please?
I just want to make sure if the employee signed the permissive election form, but they declined it because it's a legal document still because they signed, do we still need to send it to STRS if they declined it?
If they're declining membership, yes, please send that to us. The more information we have, the better. We would like to know that, yeah, they are declining membership with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Janelle from San Joaquin County. It indicates that the member is eligible to elect a membership date no earlier than the first day. So is there going to be an actual field on the form that the member is going to have to write in a specific date?
Absolutely. Yep. You'll write in the date that they want for their membership on that form.
So like during the new hire and things when we're doing this, the payroll staff is going to need to be providing some guidance so they know, you know, if they select this date, could they possibly, if they didn't select the first day they worked, 5 days later, they'd have 5 days of work not as a non-member, and then on that sixth day, because that's the date they wrote they wanted to be a member, now we report contributions on that.
Yes.
So that's where I just want to make
Answer
sure
is
if it's a
yes.
fillable field that we've got to provide really good guidance to them. They ultimately can make the decision, but we need to let them know what the ramifications are of that specific date they put.
Definitely. And then that's a little bit helpful to you on your end, right? So that way you're not
Yes.
having to, back out that reporting. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I just want to say that seems like a bigger nightmare than what we're dealing with now.
Okay.
Like a really bigger nightmare.
Okay.
But my question is, if we have a cycle 1 and a cycle 2, which first day of the pay period would you be referring to? Because we have only, certain number of districts with a cycle 2. So would we have 2 different first day of the pay period depending on, or is there something you're considering the first day of a pay period?
I think the best way to approach this would be to consider that first day of the pay period along the lines of how you report to us here at CalSTRS. So you report to us from month to month, from the 1st to the 30th?
We do both.
You do both?
Because our certificated, our subs are paid on cycle 2, and that starts on the 16th, ends on the 15th, and regular employees are paid the 1st through the end of the month. So I know we're talking about ES 350s here. So for us, that would be the 16th. So again, to back on what Janelle said, if they're going to be electing their own date, again, we're running into the same situation. If they put the 20th, they're going to have from the 16th till the 20th. And then it is increasingly going to be a nightmare for especially airing out on the STRS report. So right now, if the employee starts on 8/3 and you put 8/3 and then later they get a retro, if there's 100 employees that you put starting date 8/3, then when they key the retro, they put 8/1. That's 100 errors that now you have to go in and fix.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that being a problem with those dates as well. So.
Well, I definitely appreciate you saying something. All these people over here are definitely listening, and they're taking your comments into consideration. In regards to your previous question, yes, the law does read no earlier than the first day of the pay period in which they're electing. And so that could be different pay periods. I know Nicole and I, we were talking about this. Would you care to chime in on that point, Nicole? Sure.
Lost that dollar bet. So the pay period that you would want to use is really we're gonna go to the pay period that you use. So if you have a cycle 1, cycle 2, and this person is beginning like whatever pay period cycle they would be considered to be beginning in. So if it is the 20th and your pay period cycle 2 starts on the 16th, it would be that would be the first of the pay period in which they could elect membership. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Nicole. It doesn't, because we have one employee that elects with 5 different districts. One of those districts is on a cycle 2 and the others aren't. So now it's going to be
again, who got their form first. So then one district may say, okay, well, this person elected the 20th, but they don't know that another district, they elected it on the 15th. So again, it's going to be that very small window of opportunity to get the notice out to that district to collect contributions. There are going to be a lot of employer paid as a result.
Nicole, so wouldn't the pay periods be the regular pay period, which is monthly? Those cycle 2, those are supplemental to our pay period. It's a supplemental payroll. But the pay periods are the first through the end of the month.
You
Those
are
are
correct with
your
that.
pay
We have the law specifically talks has a definition for pay period,
Right.
and that is defined as basically a month or 4 weeks. So we do look at our definition of pay period, which might not kind of coincide with the cycle 1, cycle 2. So I guess I can correct myself in saying that. If you have those individuals who are potentially in a cycle 2,
Which is supplemental.
which is supplemental, what I'm trying to say is I don't think that if you said that the 16th was the first of the pay period in which they could elect that membership, we wouldn't necessarily question that. But if you want us to question it, we definitely can. Does that make sense? As far as the individuals who are working for potentially different districts, who have different pay periods, like that, it's just like in any other realm today. You could have someone that works for you in your county, somebody else, they could work for a totally different county and have elected membership with that county without letting you know. So there's always going to be those times where potentially someone has elected permissive membership with one employer and the other one doesn't exactly know yet. So there's always going to be those overlaps. I don't know that at this point we can resolve that issue for you. This.
Hi, Anna from Riverside County.
Uh-huh.
I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Currently, the form has just a line for the employee's signature and the date for when they signed the form. Are you saying that the new form is going to have a field for them to say, I want to be a member as of this date?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Correct. So the member can make that choice.
And we, as a county office, we can determine based on our pay periods, like Ramona was saying, the monthly period is always the first through the last of the month. So we can make the determination regardless if the employee signs on the 15th, our pay period is so we can say, okay, it's August 1st or the first of the month.
Correct. So sorry, Gabe, I'm
No,
going
you're
to
good.
jump in real quick. So the idea is that this is really the member is electing membership, or I'm sorry, the employee is electing membership into CalSTRS. It's their election. So like, I forget who it was, I think Janelle was saying that the payroll staff or the HR staff, the hiring staff are you want to work with your employees to explain what it means to be a member, when it behooves them to potentially be a member. But really, if they do decide to say, nope, I really do want the 15th and the beginning of the pay period is the 1st, and it would cause payroll to have to do 15 days in Social Security or some other retirement system and then switch over to CalSTRS, that's kind of that's really what the employee has the right to elect. It's their election. So but that's why we're adding that field in the form to allow for those employees to kind of talk about and say, this is the date that I would like. And then that hopefully the idea is that would open up dialogue between you or the HR person, whoever is giving them the form, to kind of talk about that.
Can I ask if the form is going to be specific and say that it cannot be, needs to be the first day of the pay period? So
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
is the form going to be specific with that date field and give them the information that it has to be, no earlier than the first day of the pay period?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be in the instructions and it'll be clearly explained on the form.
Okay, we have another question right here.
Can the election date be future dated?
Yes. Yes, it can.
Okay, and then if we need to have it within 60 calendar days following the election, is that the election date or the signature date?
The signature date. Yes,
Okay.
yes, the signature date. Thank you. Any other questions we can take at this time? Okay, great.
Sorry, I just want to get a clarifying one here. So
Sure.
it says it can be the first of the month in which they sign. So if, say, they are hired on the 10th, are they only allowed to make it as early as the 10th, or it can actually be the first of the month even though they aren't technically employed as of the first of the month?
Yes, it can be as early as the first of the month, even if they're just starting on the 10th.
Okay. And so is that going to pose any kind of issue once we get into the new STRS system with this employment file where, we're saying a member date is August 1st, but then in this employment file or something, would there be something we'd be reporting saying their hire date is August 10th? Is that going to
I don't think it would trip up the system.
Okay.
We can definitely ask our experts on the pension solution system about that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Harris. I'm the legislative specialist for Member Account Services. I'm the one working on the form. So I just wanted to make a correction. They're not eligible for the election until they're employed to perform credible service in a position that's excluded from mandatory membership. So if they're hired after the first day of the pay period, the earliest they could have is their first day of employment because they wouldn't have been eligible for the election until then. So I just want to make that clarification. And then yeah, so they're not eligible for the election until they're hired, and then after that, it can be no earlier than the first day of the pay period. If the first day of that pay period is before they were hired, the hire date would be the earliest effective date they could have. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have some clarifying questions on that. Can we get a microphone over here, please?
The purpose of the earliest, no earlier than the first day of the pay period, is because they can make this election at any time while they're employed to perform credible service. So they might decline membership, in which case, just another clarification, you don't have to give us the form. If they decline, we like you to, just so we have it. You're required to retain a copy. If you want to provide us a copy just so that we have it and we don't have to ask you for it later, that's fine, but you're not actually required to. You just have to retain it for your own records if it's a declination. If they're electing, they can elect it at any time. So they can elect it a year after they've been performing non-member service, in which case you would have established them in Social Security or an alternate plan, and then they're electing later. That election can be as early as the first day of the pay period. So it has to take into account the election being made at any time in their employment and then also at the beginning. If that makes sense.
Okay, great. Anything else we can answer at this point? Okay, awesome. This is really starting to sound like a training. So let's start talking about cash balance, and let's complicate this even further, yeah? So the cash balance program, as you all may be aware, is about providing some type of retirement for those employed to work less than 50% of a full-time contract. So while talking about cash balance, we'll break up our discussion into two scenarios, as my awesome colleague Bev likes to tell when she goes out talking about cash balance. First, we'll talk about a non-member who walks into a cash balance district. Maybe you've heard this story before. Sound familiar? And then we'll tell the story of a DB member who walks into a cash balance district. But before we get into that, let's talk about one thing that's the same for both. So whereas before in the old world, when a new employee came onto your campus looking for part-time work, some investigation was required on your part. You had to figure out if they were performing creditable service somewhere else, and that if they were a defined benefit member while doing this work. And on top of that, if they were a full-time defined benefit member while doing this work. And all of that, just so you know, if you're going to hand them that CB election form. So we did what we could. We couldn't take all the work away from you. So when that new employee comes onto campus for that less than 50% position, you'll still need to determine if they're a defined benefit member, but full-time or not, they can still elect cash balance at your site if you're a brand new employer where this member has never performed DB work before. If that's the case, then it's all good, and you can hand them that cash balance election form if they wish. What questions do you have about this? Okay. All right. Yes, Sean, please. Sure, absolutely. So that member that comes on for a less than 50% position, even if they are working full-time somewhere else, they can still elect cash balance at your site if they haven't performed defined benefit work there already. Okay, so whereas before you had to determine, hey, is this person a full-time DB member at another employer? They cannot elect cash balance with me. Now, even if they are a full-time DB member at another employer, they can elect cash balance with you if they've never performed that defined benefit work with you before. Questions? Okay. All right, so let's get to talking about that non-member who walks into a CB employer. Okay, so this is our story about that DB non-member, Mrs. Patterson, who walks into a CB employer. So Mrs. Patterson, she's coming onto your K-12 campus as an English teacher on a 30% contract. She has the option to elect DB, CB, Social Security if you offer it, or even an ARP. At this point, the retirement world is pretty much open to her. So she receives an ES 350 because she can elect to be a part of the DB program at any time. But with her small paycheck, she's not ready for those contributions yet. So she keeps the ES 350 form in her back pocket, folds it up, puts it in her back pocket. Now she also takes home a cash balance election form, folds it up, puts it in her back pocket because Mrs. Patterson's mother has always told her how important it is to have a CalSTRS retirement. But you know what happens? Mrs. Patterson gets busy and weeks go by and you don't hear from her, right? That's okay, it happens. But it puts you in a tough situation because then you're not sure, well, where should I report her compensation in the meantime? Well, you're gonna want to report her compensation to that retirement system, which she would have defaulted to otherwise. In this particular case, a DB non-member that walks into a cash balance employer, she would default to the cash balance program. So you can go ahead and feel good about reporting her to the cash balance program until if and when she shows up again in your district office. So getting back to Mrs. Patterson on the 59th day, on the very last day, she takes a close look at our cash balance election form, and she does what all children do, the opposite of what her mom said. And she elects that ARP. She's not familiar with all the great benefits that CalSTRS has to offer, but that's okay. That's okay. The good news for this DB non-member that walks into a cash balance employer is that even though she's not a part of CalSTRS yet, she gets to walk away with an investment in her future, and at a later date, she can always elect the defined benefit program, the cash balance program, or Social Security if you begin to offer it. So let's take a look at what enrolling a member into an ARP looks like. When enrolling an employee that does not require defined benefit membership at the time of hire, you are required to offer the employee the permissive membership form. If they don't elect at the time, they can always elect at a later date. We here at CalSTRS will take on a DB member anytime. The more the merrier. When an employee comes on board and is looking to elect ARP, we ask that you provide the member information about the retirement options available. And we ask that you notify us of the ARP election using the cash balance election form. CalSTRS does require that all this happen within 10 days of the employee's employment, and that the election form is turned into you, the employer, within 60 days of the date of hire. Once you receive the election form from the member, please forward us a copy as well, so that way we know what's happening too. Now, a couple of real important things I have to mention with this that your reporting contacts back at CalSTRS are really excited for me to share, is that when an individual comes on under an ARP, please still enroll them through REAP in the SO program or on the MR87 file using the transaction code 87. So you can begin reporting them on the F496 with a non-member code 2. The reason why this is so important is because those non-members still have the option of purchasing that creditable service time if they should later become a DB member. What questions do you have about this situation? about a non-member coming on and electing an ARP? Okay, well, let's look at that second situation, a CalSTRS DB member that walks into a cash balance district. So this is the story of Mr. Larry, who's been working full-time at a K-12 employer for the past 10 years with the Sacramento City Unified School District. Now, Mr. Larry really loves what he does, so he picks up a brand new 30% contract, helping kids learn how to read in the San Juan Unified School District, having never worked with this employer before. So Mr. Larry, he's been teaching full-time for a few years now, so he's kind of hip to the retirement game. So when he walks into your HR office, he already knows a few things, and he tells your staff member, don't hand me that ARP form, I'm a DB member. Staff member says, okay, cool. And then he says, don't give me that cash balance election form, I'm full-time somewhere else. And that's when your staff member says, whoa, 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 hold on. My boss just went to EAC, and they learned that effective as of July 1st, 2015, you can elect cash balance with us, even though you're full-time with another employer as a DB member. Bless you. Now, Mr. Larry is wowed by your staff knowledge base, right? Knowledge base. And so, well, you know what he does? Takes that form, folds it up, puts it in his back pocket, and walks out the door. That's okay. That's his option. But then again, you're in this uncomfortable situation. Where do you report Mr. Larry's compensation until he returns with that form, if he does at all? Well, just like with the ARP situation, you're going to want to report to that retirement system which he would have defaulted to otherwise. In this situation, a DB member walking into a cash balance employer, he'd default to the DB program. So you can feel good about going ahead and reporting his compensation to the DB program. So getting back to Mr. Larry, he has time checking out his options, and Mr. Larry thinks, well, I'll see what this cash balance program is all about. I mean, all the young people in the staff room are talking about it. Let's see. So he makes the leap and gives it a shot. So for that DB member that walks into a cash balance employer, Mr. Larry can always stay with DB, but he's adventurous, so with his brand new employer, where he hasn't performed DB work before, he makes that election for cash balance. Please note, though, that once an employee permissively elects or mandatorily qualifies for membership at an employer, CB, cash balance, or that ARP are no longer an option at that qualifying employer. What questions do you have about this scenario? Okay, so let's take a look at some of the important employer obligations and timeframes for Mr. Larry. So just as before with that ARP, there's a 10-day time frame to make these essential things happen. CalSTRS requires that the member be provided with the cash balance election form and that you have the conversation with them or provide some sort of information as to the benefits of the cash balance program and how that compares with the defined benefit program. Whether the employee elects cash balance or not, we ask that the member get the form back to you within 60 days and that you then mail that to us as well. The important thing about retaining and submitting these forms to CalSTRS, even when an individual chooses not to elect, is that it covers you, the employer. Should anyone come asking later on down the line, or that employee says, hey, I never got that form, I didn't get it, it covers you on your end. So when an employee elects into cash balance, enroll them through the Secure Employer website via REAP on the MR87 file with the transaction code 86. As you begin reporting on the VDF file, it's important that you also report those earnings to the DB program as well, using the F496 file with a non-member code 2. The reason why this is so important is because the time spent on cash balance, all those earnings and contributions, could be consolidated into a future DB account. So with that, we've touched on some of the larger changes with the cash balance program and took some time to review some of the key points of the program. I'm sure for those employers that don't offer cash balance, you've already heard way too much as it is. And I'm sure for those of you that do offer cash balance, we didn't talk about half of what you wanted to talk about. So I would like to take this moment to pause real quick and open up the discussion to to anybody really, and any questions you have about the cash balance program. And if that's good for everybody, we'll talk about retirement system elections. Okay. Effective January 1st, 2019, employers will now have 60 days from the member's election date to submit an original copy of the retirement system election form to us at CalSTRS and a photocopy of that election form to the system which the member is declining. So that way everybody is in the know as to what is going on. Same as before, the member still has 60 days from their hire date to make the retirement system election. So the good thing here is that you get an extra 30 days to get the retirement system election form to CalSTRS. We hope that helps. We sincerely do. However, please note that should the member be declining membership with CalSTRS and going with CalPERS, we really cannot speak to how long you have to get that form to CalPERS. This is a CalSTRS change. The important thing here is checking with the retirement system which that person is facing membership in and seeing if that employee requires membership at the time of hire and if they're not excluded from membership for any other reason. And if that's the case, there's a good chance you're going to be handing them that 372 form, that permissive election, or that retirement system election form. So there are a lot of other details we could get into regarding retirement system elections, and we can if you like, but I would like to pause, answer any questions about the form, the extra 30 days.
Just yay.
Yay? Awesome. That's what we like to hear. I appreciate that. Any questions about retirement system elections at all, as long as we're here? Yeah, there we go. We got an excited hand.
Can the employee sign it with an electronic signature?
That is an excellent question. And I'm going to say, no, they cannot.
That's what I said.
I know. I'm sorry. But we need to see that wet signature, yes.
So what if they do and the election has been denied? So the election was denied by CalPERS. Not that you guys are CalPERS, but it
Gotcha.
went through both of, everything back and forth, back and forth. Now she's questioning the whole entire thing, why it was rejected. It's valid. But what I said to the employer was, because she signed it electronically, it almost looks like she didn't turn it in. Like you didn't give her the option at all, because it could be misinterpreted that you signed that form. That's what my question was to the district, but I wasn't sure about the electronic signature at all. But now she's having questions about the whole entire process and whatnot. But
So,
this is a caveat that I wasn't. I was just
Yeah.
made aware of this morning. I got a copy of the form, and it had an electronic signature on it.
So I'm just curious. Excuse me, Gabe.
Go ahead, jump in.
Like they had a PDF of it, and then they used like the PDF pencil thing to try to sign their. Is that what it looks like?
So as you guys know, or you may not know, CalPERS, they upload the form into their system. So the county office does not sign off on it. We don't get a copy of the original.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So CalPERS said that doesn't look like an original signature. It looks like electronic signature.
It wasn't rejected for that reason.
Oh, okay.
But now the employee is, saying you never gave me the right.
I see.
Gotcha.
That's an interesting rejection scenario. We couldn't solve it, but it's good for us to think about.
Yeah.
Because in our new system, we would want you to upload that document to us, but it would still need to be an original signature.
Christine,
Go ahead.
let me jump in. Nicole again. So The way that it works, it's a CalSTRS form. Hi, it's a CalSTRS form. We've heard this from actually a lot of districts recently, not even recently, over the past couple of years, districts and counties, of wanting to ask if this could be an electronic form. So a lot of schools are going towards that like electronic format for hiring documentation, where everyone is allowed to do that for their own forms. This is a CalSTRS form. We require it to be wet signature. And for CalPERS, I know that they, because of their system updates, you guys can actually go ahead and type in the information. But how I understand it, and I would definitely double check with PERS on this, is they still want you to like scan and upload the form along with that electronic submission, I guess, of the person's election. So I don't. Not that that's why they declined the election itself, but I don't believe that they would necessarily look at whether or not it was a wet signature or an electronic signature. And again, you'd have to double check with PERS on their requirements for that. But for CalSTRS, again, it's a CalSTRS form. We require the form to be in its properly executed format, meaning wet signature. And I mean, that can be, scanned and emailed to us. We don't need like the actual, form type of thing, but electronic formatting at this point is not allowable. It's a font.
I think it's an interesting argument, though, that now the member is saying, well, you can't prove then I actually got it. I think that's the ultimate question, and we'd have to argue that one. I don't know. That's interesting, though.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, though, so everyone else can be aware that, yes, it must be a wet signature that electronic signature will not do for CalSTRS purposes. We have a question here up front. If I could get a mic runner, please. Right here, Jason, young lady in the gray.
I just need to clarify because you said that the county office didn't get a copy of this at all, that it went straight to PERS. The county has to sign it.
Not for CalPERS. Only for CalSTRS.
I love it. I love it that everybody remembered that from the Ed Forum.
I've always signed everything.
That's true. So CalPERS only requires one or the other, not both. CalSTRS requires both signatures.
Any other questions in regards to retirement system elections? Or what other questions do you have that I can answer in regards to retirement system elections? Let's talk about cash balance. That's cool.
Okay. So we're a little confused in terms of the permissive election. I heard that if you submit a permissive election, that you cannot elect CB if you've never been employed at the CB. Is that correct?
Not 100% correct. So if you permissively elect membership, we see that, like I was saying earlier, is a conscious decision that for all those employers that you're already working for, that you're going to want DB membership at all those employers.
Okay, and then you go and get hired at a CB district that offers CB, and since this is like a new job, can I still elect CB, or does that DB permissive election carry on into this new employer?
Yes, now you can elect CB at that new employer.
So I do have the option of electing cash balance at the new employer only.
Correct, at the new employer only.
Okay. All right,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for that clarifying question. Other questions about anything at all? Within reason.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to clarify again that while we are updating the ES 350 for January, we're working with CalPERS to update the ES 372 as well. And then the CB 533 will look a lot different for UCB employers. And I think Suzanne's team will reach out to our CB folks specifically to kind of go over some of the changes you're going to see on the CB 533 form once we get closer to having that finalized.
Hi, Renee from Napa.
Hey, what's up,
I'm
Renee?
curious why the ES 372 says membership effective first day of employment, but yet the ES 350 doesn't have that same language, and the employee can elect membership on a particular day that's not their first day of employment? Why wouldn't it be consistent?
I'm going to defer that one to our legislative team that writes these.
That's a great question. We actually get asked that quite a bit by newer staff sometimes. But the ES 372, so the retirement system election, the election has to be made within 60 days of employment, and it applies all or nothing to all of your service in that position. The ES 350 is a membership. It's not by position. The ES 350 is not even by employer. A lot of you folks think that it's by employer because an employer processes it. It's a all-encompassing election for DB membership that you can make any time while you're employed to perform credible service in any position. So we can't have a time frame associated with it being tied to the date of employment, because you can really elect it at any time. If you've been in a position for 2 years, you can go ahead and elect it. So it has to have some parameters around the date. So I know it's not ideal, but that's the reason for the difference there.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks, Renee. What other questions can we answer? Yes.
Sorry. Could it be membership effective first day or a day after? So first of the following. So like it's more specific, because it just seems like on the ES 350, that language that's on there could be confusing for when it says first day of the pay period for the new hire employee, and not understanding how pay periods and such work, that maybe it's membership effective first day of hire or
So the law would already support that, but I can definitely, we already have the form going through the works, but I can definitely make that clear on the form instructions and date, that it's no earlier than the first day of employment or the effective date. Actually, we can find a way to make it clear so that it's supported by law. They can't backdate the election is what we have to avoid here. So they can't fill it out 2 years later and backdate it to their first day of employment. So we can work with the language, and I'm happy to work with you directly on that, Renee. We were working on something we were emailing a little bit ago, but I can work with you to craft something that serves your need. Yeah.
Awesome. These are great questions. This is definitely the forum in which to bring these up while we have these listening ears available. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap this up, and we're going to talk about sustainability and what that means to CalSTRS and how that relates to this most recent directive. So when CalSTRS talks about sustainability, we're talking about the sustainability of the future, not just for the members of today, but for the members of tomorrow as well, and the children of those members who may become educators one day too. So we're talking about the sustainability of this increasingly rarefied retirement program called a defined benefit. We're talking about sustaining the dream of being justly rewarded for the time spent guiding our youth, and to have that reward based on their time and energy spent. So this is a precious thing that CalSTRS is trying to sustain. The word sustainability is also used in the context of the environment, and this is one that we're probably all a bit more familiar with. CalSTRS likes to approach sustainability from many angles, from the environment to investment strategies to best practices around the office. Those of you that have visited us at our headquarters or our member service centers know we got trash cans for things I didn't even know existed, right? But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And we have a unit within our building that educates us on reducing waste and reducing our carbon footprint. So with that in mind, I'm going to bring the conversation back to what we're talking about here today, this most recent membership directive. Previously, CalSTRS would print the new directives for the employers and mail out a copy to everybody. Well, we've been finding over time that not all of you have been receiving those mailings. In fact, roughly 40% of those get returned to us. And we're 99% sure we have the right address, okay? So CalSTRS is making the sustainable move to provide the directive online and to stop mailing out our paper copies. This keeps in line with our practice of providing the teacher retirement law online, retirement progress reports for members, and the majority of CalSTRS publications. The good news is that it appears that many of you are already accessing this material online. And for those of you that have been relying upon the mailing, we have avenues to help you access that material. You have that handout in your folder, but I'm going to go over it here real quick. First, new and old directives can be found a couple of different ways. You can access the directives through the Secure Employer website. Under Reference Items, checkmark the Directives and Circulars box and hit Search. If you click on that little blue open link next to Directives, it'll take you to the directives on CalSTRS.com. That takes us to our second way of accessing the directives. You can skip SO altogether and just go straight to CalSTRS.com. Click on the Employers tab and the screen will populate with all the directives and circulars CalSTRS has published, reaching back to the 1996-1997 fiscal year. And if you are unsure as to whether there is a new directive out or not, your ES analyst, your point of contact, will send you an email alerting you that a new directive is out and how you can access it. If you have any questions, concerns, you can always call or email employerhelp@calstrs.com, and that will get you to your point of contact, like Jason and Peter that we have here in the room. And I'll show that email at the end of this presentation. So there are some exciting things happening with directives. I think the most exciting being the comprehensive approach to the directive. It does have pros and cons. Like Christine mentioned earlier, it is a much longer read. But then again, it is kind of a one-stop shop for you all to get the information that you need in regards to that subject area. So very informally, can I get a show of hands who likes this new format of being comprehensive, all in one place? That's fair enough. That's fair enough. The eyes that you want seeing are looking right now. And then what about everything being provided online? Who likes the online? Much better, yeah? Okay, no need for the mailings? Awesome. Okay, well, that's it for me. At this point, I would like, oh, yes, question.
Thanks, Jason. Congratulations, by the way. So this is awesome. I love that everything's in one place. We don't need all that paper. It just sits in boxes. It really doesn't matter. Some of us, though, like myself, I don't go on to sew all the time. I rely on my management team, who goes on there all the time, and they see stuff. But sometimes it'd be nice for me to personally receive, not necessarily the circular or directive, but maybe just a link to it, or just an alert that a new directive is out. Here's the link. And so, is that what you're talking about? Or see, I don't necessarily, as much as I love Jason, he deals with them. So I'm kind of out of the loop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
More of an administrative function. And so, is there something for someone like me?
Yeah, I would say first you probably want to talk to your COE contact, Lena here, and see what she has to say about all that. But you can always get on Jason's email list.
I am
right?
the COE.
Oh, excuse me. Excuse me.
But I'll check with
Lena
her.
and Michelle all the time. So.
She was out when you came to our county office.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I missed you then.
No, I'm sorry I missed you too.
Actually, so it's a good point, and I would just say that yes, we are, because of the shift from the mailings, we are talking about how we can do an email blast. And so what I hear you saying is that although you have access to, so you don't necessarily sign in.
That's exactly
right.
it.
And so so what we have discussed is about doing an email blast to say, hey, something new is out there. We'll try to do that specifically for directives, because that's new and changing information we need you to have as soon as possible. So we'll try not to dump a bunch of stuff in your email boxes. And the other thing I like about this approach is that for staff like yourself and others of you who have less involved senior leadership in your organizations, you don't have to print it out for them, because you can send them the link to just the .com and not have to say, well, do you remember that password you set up 3 years ago? Right. So
no, I don't.
Right.
Don't let it get around.
So we we will be coming up with a mechanism to ping everyone when there's something new out there as a an alternative to this paper.
I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome,
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate it. And we'll have to get that together really quickly because that directive. I'm sorry, the file format plus is very important for all of you to go and take a look at.
Okay. It helps me keep Lena in line. She could totally be pulling the wool over my eyes. I don't know. I don't get any notifications.
Oh, that's super fun. Anybody else? Yes.
I already have the mic too.
Awesome.
I have a question about the ES350. Can I ask that now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so my question is, I've been here a little over 2 years, and it's already changed the requirements for that twice since I've been here, and now we're talking about changing it again. And my first question is, why are we changing it so often? What are we trying to gain from doing this? And then, well, answer that first.
So I would like to take it, Nicole. So 2 years ago is when I came into the role, and actually that was when we had one of the major changes, which was the month following, first pay period following, and that created unintended consequences. I see a lot of head nods. So if it had worked for everyone, we would not have changed it. So that isn't our normal course of business. We like to be responsive, however, and the overwhelming majority of you had said that gap period was an issue. And so that was the reason why we took it back and we opened it back up and did some focused forums with all of you. We talked about it at this meeting and for individual sessions. And so the reason we opened it up again was to be responsive to the overwhelming needs of the group as a whole. That being said, every time we make some changes like this, there are some unintended consequences for a smaller number of you. And so what I would ask is that you work with your employer services representative so that we can troubleshoot the issues that it's causing you. Sometimes it's the result of misunderstanding the total picture, which is why we went to this approach with the directives, to give you the whole information and not just one slice of it. And then we could try to figure out how we can solve that particular headache for your agency, and not have to keep opening this back up. But for you, this lens for you is just, this happened to be a big issue that happened 2 years ago, and we're trying to fix it. So we don't normally touch it so often.
So these changes are already set in stone. It's coming regardless of.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Thank you, Gabe. You're welcome. Thank you.
so moving on to the agenda, I'm glad. I really appreciate this robust conversation. I want to ask if there's any other items you'd like to discuss. So this is our open forum time. No. Yes, ma'am. Do we have a question? I'm sorry, if you could do that, Mike, because for those that are listening. Thank
Tina
you.
Wolverton from Lodi Unified. I'm just going to take this opportunity to ask a question of one of our retired members who just recently retired, and her credit came in, her service credit was being recorded as like a .998, I believe, which we were aware that it was being rolled up to 1. Is that still what's happening for that service credit, or is it still remaining at a .998 when you guys are looking at it?
For her specifically?
For her specifically.
I would have to look at her case
Okay.
to see what was going on with it, but we can connect after
That'd be great.
this meeting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other open forum items? Okay, so you're going to look at the File Plus, Layout Plus. You're going to contact your technical teams and give us a date, which we'll have a couple hours together to talk about your individual specific needs. Shout out to LAUSD in Riverside, who I know we're talking with next week. And then make sure that you come with all your questions and all the challenges you think you might see associated with the ask in the new file formats, so that we can try to get them all in and responded to, and then as part of the rulemaking process starting in February. Okay? All right, so.
You want me to take it over?
I'm sorry?
You want me to take over the?
Yes.
Sure. Okay. So, and then one of our takeaways is to come up with a way to email blast everyone so that all the new directives are available. And whether that's a mandatory, we'll just push it out, or it'll be a voluntary sign up. Those are some details that we'll take back and report back at our next EAC meeting, which we've got the calendar. It's in everybody's folders. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 6th in 2019. It will be moving to CalSTRS on the other side of the river. So the meetings for calendar year 19 will all be at CalSTRS. Currently, we're planning to do CalPERS in the morning and CalSTRS in the afternoon. So even though we're moving locations, we're going to keep the morning session with CalPERS. And then included at the bottom of that agenda for February, we have dates through the calendar year. Want to make note that both August and November are tentative dates. They're tentative based on when CalPERS and CalSTRS have board meetings. So we'll keep you guys apprised of that as soon as those fiscal year board calendars are finalized as we get a little bit closer. There's also a feedback sheet in your form, so if you wouldn't mind filling those out, what you liked, what you didn't like, so that we can hopefully provide better content, more appropriate content, or we can double down on the things that are really helpful. So with that, thank you.
Also, I would just invite you to listen to our board item next week. I believe it's on the 8th, around 11 in the morning is when it's scheduled for now. You can live stream it from the .com and just to listen. I think it's going to be pretty interesting as we talk about it with our board. And I think you'll be pleased to hear how much they support you and recognize the effort that this is going to take. And then also hear comments from the public. And then pull that new file format Layout Plus that it's speaking to, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I